is going to figure out a way to subliminally tell us some off, bro. We seen the display the other day when she walked past reporters with her face up against the wall like this. Like she ain't want to talk to nobody. Well, I'm here to tell you, we finally get locker room footage. Now, this is something that we have not seen throughout this entire tournament. Videos of what is going down inside Team USA locker room. Now, before we play this clip, I'm going to let y'all know, this is very profound. Now, in the footage that I'm about to show you guys, you're going to see Caitlin Clark not talking to him.
There's footage circulating right now that has broken the internet in two, and depending on which side you fall on, it either confirms everything you suspected about this team, or completely flips the narrative on its head. Caitlin Clark, the most talked about basketball player on the planet right now, was caught on camera doing something so strange, so out of place, that fans are still debating what it actually means. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. We're going to walk through everything. The footage, the numbers, the behind-the-scenes tension, the press conference drama, and the one question that nobody in the media seems willing to ask out loud. If Caitlin Clark is the best player on this Team USA roster, why is she being treated like a background character in her own story?
It's letting us know her attitude while in Puerto Rico, I should say. Now, with that being said, let's pull up this clip right now so y'all don't think I'm clickbaiting the line. So, this is a clip that has garnered a lot of attention online from Paige Bueckers fans. Now, I believe this video was to be hyping up Paige or something dealing with Paige. Let's watch. Stop it right here. What is Caitlin doing on her body? She ain't part of the circus.
Before we get into all of that, if you have been following this story and you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button right now. We are covering everything on the Caitlin Clark situation as it develops, and you do not want to miss what is coming. To understand why this moment feels so loaded, you have to go back to the summer of 2025. Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA season as the undisputed face of women's basketball. She had rewritten the rookie record books the year before. Sponsors were lining up. Arenas were selling out. The machine was fully in motion. And then it all stopped. A quad strain early in the 2025 season derailed her momentum almost immediately. She pushed through it for a few games, but the body had other plans. A groin injury followed. And just when it seemed like she might claw her way back, a foot injury shut her down entirely. In the end, Caitlin Clark played just 13 games in her sophomore WNBA season. 13. For a player who was supposed to be ascending to a completely different level, it was a brutal and humbling detour. She still averaged 16.5 points per game in those 13 appearances, which tells you everything about what she is capable of when healthy. But averaging 16 points across 13 games, while visibly battling your own body, is not the same as taking over a league. The Fever made the playoffs without her at full strength. The national conversation shifted, and for the first time in her young career, people started asking whether Caitlin Clark's body could hold up to the demands of professional basketball. 239 days passed without her playing a single competitive game. No games, no meaningful court time, nothing. And the entire time, the expectations did not shrink. If anything, they grew. So when Team USA assembled in Puerto Rico for the 2026 FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in March 2026, every camera in the building was pointed at number 22. This was not just a comeback story. This was a test. Could she still be that player? Could she carry that weight again? The answer came fast, and it was not subtle.
That reposted this, catching this, how she clocked the camera every single time. I don't think Caitlin Clark clocked the camera every single time. I think this shows us Caitlin Clark is in a league of her own, and she's ignoring everybody. Watch it again without me interrupting. Watch it again.
She broke records and still did not start. The first game was against Senegal. Caitlin Clark did not walk out with the starters. She sat on the bench while the opening five took the floor, and if you were watching closely, that alone sparked immediate conversation online. Here is a player who had not competed in 8 months, who had just completed a full rehabilitation process, who the entire fan base showed up to watch, and she was coming off the bench. But what happened when she did step onto the court put everything else to the side for a moment. In just 19 minutes of play, Caitlin Clark scored 17 points, dished out 12 assists, knocked down 4 3-pointers, and finished with an efficiency rating that was the highest on the entire roster. Team USA won 110-46. And according to multiple reports, Clark broke 5 FIBA world records in a single game during her senior national team debut. 5 records in one outing, coming off the bench, returning from an 8-month injury absence. That is not a comeback. That is a statement. But the celebration was short-lived because the next game came around and the question remained exactly the same. Who is starting? The answer was not Caitlin Clark.
With them. But if you guys did not know, Caitlin Clark leads Team USA in scoring and FIBA qualifying dominance. The Indiana Fever star tops Team USA in scoring at 12.8 points per game, assists at 6.3, and efficiency at 15. Powering blowout wins over Senegal, Puerto Rico, Italy, and New Zealand that clinched the World Cup qualifying. Clark steals deep threes and playmaking with teammates like Paige Bueckers, Ryan Howard, have fans voting her to 34% in FIBA's San Juan MVP poll, shooting 59% from the field and 41%.
Coach Kara Lawson opted to go with veterans like Chelsea Gray in the starting lineup again, while the player who just broke 5 world records in her debut continued to come off the pine. Lawson addressed the situation after the game, saying the rotation would evolve and that she was gathering information about which combinations created the best chemistry. On the surface, that is a totally reasonable coaching explanation. Coaches make lineup decisions based on matchups and flow. Clark herself responded gracefully, saying that sometimes you start and sometimes you come off the bench, and you have to be ready when your name is called. But the fans were not hearing it. When the leader in points, assists, and efficiency on your roster is coming off the bench while players with lower production are in the starting 5, the optics are impossible to ignore. And the optics, combined with everything else happening around the edges of this tournament, started to paint a very specific picture.
Have fans voting her to 34% in FIBA's San Juan MVP poll, shooting 59% from the field and 41% from 3. She's silencing past critics after her 2024 Olympic snub, with Team USA facing Spain next on March the 17th, which is tomorrow. Now, Caitlin Clark is voted best player, right? So let's say Caitlin Clark win this MVP race, right? How is she only starting only 1 game? Y'all do realize that. She's winning in the MVP voting, but she started.
Then came the clip. After Team USA's went over Italy, cameras caught Caitlin Clark exiting through the tunnel toward the locker room. While her teammates walked in a single file line, Clark broke from the pack and pressed herself against the wall near the FIBA backdrop, seemingly trying to duck past the cameras positioned in the tunnel. Her face was close to the wall. Her body language was closed off, and the moment lasted just a few seconds before she slipped through. It went viral instantly. Social media split into 2 very distinct camps. One side saw it as a lighthearted, playful moment, just a superstar being goofy and dodging the media after a win. Some outlets described it as a fun tunnel moment. A few reporters wrote it up as just Clark being herself, someone who is not exactly obsessed with camera time after games. Given her reputation for being a private, locked-in competitor, that reading made total sense to a lot of people. But the other camp saw something completely different. They pointed to a separate piece of footage taken inside the locker room environment, where Clark appeared isolated from the rest of the team. While other players were laughing, joking around, and mixing freely, Clark had her head down and was not engaging with anyone. No smiling, no joining the group energy, just complete separation from the rest of the squad. When you stack that clip on top of the tunnel footage, the playful reading starts to feel less convincing.
Let's say Caitlin Clark win this MVP race, right? How is she only starting only 1 game? Y'all do realize that. She's winning in the MVP voting, but she started 1 game. Caitlin Clark has yet to sit down alongside Team USA coach and speak to the media after the games. Not one time has we heard from Caitlin Clark on the big stage at the podium. She has not been to the podium not one single time. Now, she's not the only one, but hell, judging off what we just read, if she's winning...
The theory that spread from there was darker and a lot more specific. People started saying that Caitlin Clark is not comfortable in this environment, that she's not a part of the inner circle on this Team USA squad, that she was left off the Olympic team in 2024, and now she has returned to a national program where certain people simply do not want her there. And her response to all of that, according to this theory, is not to complain loudly, is to press her face against the wall, keep her head down, and let her game speak for her. Whether the footage tells that story or not, the conversation it sparked reveals exactly how much tension is already bubbling beneath the surface of this team. The podium problem. There's another detail that has gone relatively under the radar, but once you notice it, it is very hard to stop thinking about. Throughout this FIBA qualifying tournament, Caitlin Clark has not sat at the podium for a full post-game press conference alongside the head coach. Not once. While she is the leading scorer on the roster, the player dominating the fan MVP vote, and arguably the most recognizable figure in all of women's sports right now, she has not been given the microphone on the big stage after wins. Other players have stepped up to speak. The veterans have had their moments. Paige Bueckers has been one of the most visible faces at the podium, but Clark, absent. Now, there are two ways to read this. The first is that the team is managing her workload intentionally after a serious injury. 8 months off the court is not nothing. Maybe the decision to keep her away from extended media responsibilities is about protecting her energy and focus during the tournament. That would be a reasonable and even thoughtful approach. The second reading is a lot less charitable. If you're a fan who watched her get left off the Olympic roster in 2024, who watched her come back from injury to break 5 world records in her debut, and who is now watching her be kept away from the cameras while others speak for the team, you do not need a conspiracy theory to feel like something is off. The pattern is visible and consistent. The most famous player on the team is being filtered out of the public conversation while other players shape the narrative. Paige Bueckers, by contrast, has become the media face of this tournament. Her answers at the podium have been polished, thoughtful, and full of the kind of team-first language that coaches love. She has talked about the pride of wearing the USA uniform, the unselfishness of the group, and the relationships being built. It reads perfectly, and in a vacuum, it is completely genuine. Bueckers is a charismatic, media-savvy player, and there is nothing wrong with any of that. But when Clark is nowhere to be found and Bueckers is front and center, it creates a dynamic that fans are interpreting in very specific ways. And it feeds directly into the next layer of this story. Bueckers, Clark, and the dynamic everyone is watching. Let us be real about who Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers are to each other, because the relationship is more complicated than the simple rivalry narrative suggests. Going into the 2026 WNBA season, their respective teams are set to play each other on May 9th in what is already being billed as one of the most anticipated regular season matchups the league has ever had. Clark and her Indiana Fever lead the all-time series against Bueckers and her Dallas Wings. Bueckers took the WNBA Rookie of the Year award from Clark in 2025. Both of them represent the twin pillars of the next era of women's basketball. At FIBA qualifying, they are on the same side. Teammates. And the early signs of what that looks like on the court have been genuinely exciting. There are plays where their connection flows naturally, where Bueckers sets the table and Clark finishes, or where Clark's court vision creates an open look for Bueckers' off movement. When it works, is a preview of how dangerous this team can be going forward. But off the court, the contrast between them is stark. Clark described the team's performance in the early games as, quote, clunky, which is the kind of honest assessment that coaches love when they hear it in private and wince at when it ends up in a headline. Bueckers has been giving the more polished, quotable sound bites, and fans who are paying close attention are not missing any of it. Here is what is interesting, though. Neither player has said anything publicly that suggests genuine animosity. The narrative of a deep personal rift between them is being built almost entirely by outside observers reading body language and comparing their media approaches. Clark has been direct and professional in every comment she has made. Bueckers has praised the team. The actual tension may be less about their personal relationship and more about a larger structural issue within the program itself. Which brings us to the question that is really driving all of this. Angel Reese and the other layer nobody is ignoring. If you thought the dynamic between Clark and Bueckers was the whole story, there's another dimension to this that fans have been tracking just as closely. During the Senegal debut, there was a moment following a foul where Angel Reese and Paige Bueckers were seen helping Clark up off the court. It felt warm. It felt like the kind of natural teammate moment that makes you think rivalries dissolve when there's a shared goal. Social media briefly celebrated the image of three WNBA stars setting old tensions aside for their country. Then came the Puerto Rico game. Observers watching closely noted that Clark and Reese appeared to be operating in completely separate orbits. No visible interaction between them. No acknowledgement of shared moments. Just two players existing in the same space without connecting. The contrast from the Senegal footage was noticeable enough that it became its own conversation thread online. Now, to be clear, reading team chemistry from broadcast footage and fanshot video is not exactly a precise science. Players go through different headspaces game to game. The fact that Reese and Clark were not visibly bonding in one game does not mean the relationship is fractured. Reese has had her own standout moments in the tournament, posting double-digit scoring and big rebounding numbers that have made her own case for relevance on this roster. But the reason fans keep analyzing every frame is because of history. The Clark-Reese dynamic has been one of the most talked about relationships in women's sports for the last 2 years. Their on-court exchanges in the WNBA have carried weight, emotion, and real narrative tension. When they're thrown onto the same team and cameras are everywhere, every gesture gets magnified tenfold. And right now, the footage is not exactly screaming unity. The MVP race that makes no sense. Here is where the numbers become genuinely impossible to explain away. Through the first 4 games of the tournament, Caitlin Clark was averaging 12.8 points per game, 6.3 assists per game, and carrying the highest efficiency rating on the roster. She was shooting 59% from the field and over 40% from behind the three-point line. In a team that was winning every game by at least 30 points, she was the engine driving the offense, the facilitator making everyone around her better, and the finisher draining deep threes that made highlight reels across every platform. Against New Zealand, she scored 14 points and added 6 assists, playing a key role in stabilizing the offense after a slow start from the opening lineup. That pattern, by the way, is worth noting. The starters would open the game, things would feel a little sluggish, and then Clark would enter from the bench, and the floor spacing would open up immediately. It happened more than once. Fans recognized all of this, and they responded. In the FIBA San tournament MVP fan vote, Clark was sitting at 34%, one of the highest totals in the entire tournament. She was in a neck-and-neck race with Paige Bueckers for the top spot, with some tracking showing Bueckers slightly ahead by a few thousand votes going into the final games. So let that sink in for a second. The player leading the fan MVP vote is the same player who started exactly 1 game through the first portion of the tournament. The player who broke 5 FIBA world records in her debut is coming off the bench. The most efficient player on the roster is averaging more minutes off the bench than some starters are averaging while in the opening 5. The disconnect between what the stats say and how this player is being deployed is one of the most genuinely strange things happening in sports right now. And the strangest part of all, Clark herself has not publicly complained. Not once. She has said all the right things. She has acknowledged the team dynamics. She has said she accepts whatever role the coach gives her and that she just wants to be ready when called upon. That composure is either a sign of incredible maturity from a 24-year-old, or it is the kind of quiet dignity that comes when you have made peace with the fact that the system is simply not going to give you what you deserve, and you have decided to let your game do the talking instead. What the silence is really telling us. There is something uniquely revealing about watching a player choose to stay silent in a situation like this. Think about what Caitlin Clark is managing right now simultaneously. She spent 8 months rehabbing after 3 separate lower body injuries. She returned to competition at the highest level of international basketball. She broke records in her first game. She is leading the team statistically in virtually every meaningful offensive category. She is doing all of this coming off the bench while the conversation about her role remains deliberately vague. She has not been given a prominent seat at the press conference table, and footage of her avoiding cameras has been turned into a cultural debate about her attitude and her relationships. Most athletes would crack under even a fraction of that pressure. Most would say something slightly off script that becomes the story. Most would let a little frustration slip through. Clark has been almost surgically composed. The one moment that got significant attention, the tunnel footage where she pressed against the wall to avoid cameras, was described by multiple outlets as a playful moment. She herself carries an energy in interviews that is focused, measured, and entirely aware of the stage she is on. But here's the thing about composure under pressure. It can look like peace from the outside while hiding something much heavier underneath. The players who seem the calmest are sometimes the ones working the hardest to not let anyone see what they are actually carrying. And when you consider everything stacked on Caitlin Clark's plate right now, the footage of her with her head down and her face near the wall starts to feel less like a viral moment and more like a very human response to an incredibly difficult situation. She was left off the 2024 Olympic team, while players who were statistically her peers or below made the roster. She came back from injury to prove that decision wrong. She is doing it, and somehow, the conversation around her is still being filtered through the lens of whether she fits in, whether she's a good teammate, whether she's approachable enough, rather than through the lens of what the box score is saying every single night. The fans voting for her as MVP are not confused. They're watching the same games. They see what she is producing. The gap between how she is being evaluated by the people in charge and how she is being valued by the people watching is one of the most fascinating stories in women's sports right now. The Spain game and what comes next. Everything was building toward the final day. March 17th, Team USA versus Spain. Spain is not Senegal or New Zealand. Spain is a program built on discipline, physicality, and tournament experience. They're the kind of team that exposes cracks in chemistry and punishes inefficient rotations. If the American squad was going to face any real test in this qualifying tournament, it was going to come from Spain. The questions heading into that game were layered. Would Clark finally start? Would she get consistent touches in a high-pressure environment against a team that would not roll over? Would the press conference situation change after the final whistle? Would any of the footage circulating online translate into something real and visible on the court? But beyond the immediate game, there's a bigger picture question hanging over all of this. Caitlin Clark made her senior national team debut at 24 years old. She came in after 8 months off. She immediately broke records. She immediately led the team in key statistical categories. And somehow, the dominant storyline is not about her ascent. It is about whether she belongs in the room. That says something uncomfortable about the environment she is operating in, and it says something just as uncomfortable about how we cover women's basketball as a culture. The talent has never been in question. The stats have never been in question. The fan base has never wavered. The controversy, the footage, the podium absences, the bench roll, all of it adds up to something that goes beyond one tournament in Puerto Rico. This is a player who is redefining the ceiling of her sport, and somehow, the story keeps getting pulled back toward whether the people around her are comfortable with that. What we are watching unfold in real time is what happens when one player becomes too big for the structure that surrounds her. Not too big in an ego sense, too big in a gravity sense. Caitlin Clark pulls attention, money, headlines, and fan engagement in a way that makes the people around her have to make choices about how to respond to that. Some respond by leaning in. Some respond by trying to manage it. And some respond by pressing her toward the corner of the room and hoping the camera does not notice. The camera noticed. If you have been watching this unfold and you want to keep following it as the story develops, drop a comment telling us where you stand. Do you think the bench roll and the media silence are intentional? Or do you think the footage is being overread? And make sure you hit subscribe so you get every update as this situation moves forward. The FIBA qualifying story is not over, and the WNBA season is right around the corner. Whatever is happening inside this team right now is going to carry forward. And when Clark steps back onto the court for the Indiana Fever in May, the conversation about everything that happened in Puerto Rico will be impossible to avoid. The stats tell one story. The footage tells another. And somewhere between those two versions of reality, Caitlin Clark is just doing what she has always done. Showing up, putting the work in, and letting the numbers settle the argument. Whether anyone in that locker room wants to acknowledge it or not, the scoreboard knows her name. And so does every fan in the building.